laying motionless on a stretcher with cracked ribs. Every breath felt like breaking glass. My mother called, not to ask if I was alive, but to scream that her card getting declined would be embarrassing. I finally realized I was just a breathing ATM to her, but she had no idea that my grandfather was about to make one single move that would bring her entire parasitic empire crashing down like a house of cards. My name is Greta Thomas, and the first thing I knew about my new life was the color white, a blinding, sterile, aggressive white that burned the back of my retinas. The second thing I knew was the sound. It wasn't a voice, it was a rhythmic, mechanical beeping, synced to the dull, throbbing drum inside my chest. I tried to inhale, but my lungs refused to expand. It felt like a belt had been tightened around my ribcage, pulled by a giant hand until the bones groaned under the pressure. I blinked, trying to clear the fog. Briar Glen Emergency Room. The name was stitched in blue thread on the curtain to my left. The air smelled of rubbing alcohol and old coffee. My left hand felt heavy, taped down with an IV line, and my right hand was sticky. I looked down. Dried blood. It was caked under my fingernails and smeared across the back of my knuckles. Then came the vibration. It wasn't a gentle buzz. It was a violent, angry rattle against the metal railing of the stretcher. My phone. The screen was cracked, a spider web of glass fracturing the light. But the caller ID shone through the wreckage clearly. Mom. A wave of instinctual panic hit me before the pain did. I had to answer. If I didn't answer, she would worry. If I didn't answer, she would call the police. If I didn't answer, I was a bad daughter. That was the programming. Installed code by code over 3 decades. I fumbled for the device, my fingers stiff and uncooperative. I swiped the green icon, bringing the phone to my ear. My voice was a croak, a broken sound that barely made it past my lips. Mom? I expected a scream of terror. I expected tears. I expected her to ask which hospital I was in, or if she needed to drive down from the city. Greta, thank God you finally picked up. Her voice cut through the fog, sharp and clear. There was no static, just the ambient noise of a busy lobby in the background. I am standing at the check-in desk at the Sapphire Sands, and the card was declined. Declined. Greta, do you have any idea how mortifying that is? The clerk is looking at me like I am some sort of vagrant. I blinked, the words failing to process. My brain was still trying to catalog the damage to my body. Cracked ribs, a concussion, maybe internal bleeding, and she was talking about a hotel. Mom, I wheezed, the effort sending a spike of agony through my side. I was in a car accident, a truck. It ran the red light. There was a pause on the other end. A silence that lasted exactly 2 seconds. Are you conscious? She asked. Her tone wasn't fearful. It was practical, like she was asking if the Wi-Fi was working. Yes, I am in the ER at Briar Glen. Good. So you can access your banking app, she said, the relief in her voice palpable. Look, I need you to transfer the funds immediately. I decided to upgrade to the oceanfront suite because Sloan is coming down tomorrow, and we need the extra space. It is only $3,950 for the week, plus the deposit. $3,950. The number hung in the air, suspended between the beep of the heart monitor and the rattle of a gurney rolling past my curtain. Mom, I said, my voice gaining a little more traction, fueled by a confusion that was rapidly turning into something colder. I am in the hospital. My car is totaled. I don't know if... Greta, stop being dramatic, she snapped. The sweetness vanished, replaced by the tone she used when I was 12 and hadn't folded the laundry correctly. You are talking, so you are obviously fine. Do not make this about you right now. I have a line of people behind me, and the manager is watching. If this card gets declined again, I will literally die of shame. Just open the app and move the money. Do it now. Where is Leo? I asked. The name of my 7-year-old son was the only anchor I had left. Oh, for heaven's sake, he is with that neighbor of yours. Mrs. Gable. I called her when you didn't pick up the first 5 times. He is fine. He is eating pizza. Now. Focus. Greta. $3,950. I need it to clear in the next 2 minutes. She didn't ask if I was hurt. She didn't ask if I was alone. She had called my neighbor to ensure her babysitter, me, wasn't available. And then she had moved on to the real crisis. Her credit limit. I pulled the phone away from my ear. I looked at the screen. The cracked glass made her contact photo look fractured. Her perfect smile split into jagged shards. I opened my banking app. Face ID struggled to recognize me. My face was likely swollen. But on the second try, the green checkmark flashed. I stared at the balance. For 8 years, I had lived with a feature called overdraft protection. It was a fancy term for a financial umbilical cord. My mother's credit card was linked to my primary checking account. If she spent more than her limit, or if her payment was due, my account automatically swept funds over to cover it. We had set it up when I was 22. Under the guise of building my credit and emergency safety, I looked at the transaction history, pending charge, Sapphire Sands Resort, $3,950. Status, declined, insufficient funds. It wasn't that I didn't have the money. I had a good job as a risk analyst. I made 6 figures. But looking at the ledger, I saw the truth in red and black numbers. Yesterday, $700 for spa services. 3 days ago, $1,200 for flight upgrade. Last week, $450 for boutique wine. I closed my eyes. The pain in my chest was sharp, but the pain in my stomach was a dull, rotting ache. I did the math. I didn't want to, but my brain, trained to analyze risk and loss, did it automatically. She averaged about $4,000 a month, sometimes more, 8 years. That was 96 months. 96 multiplied by 4,000, $384,000. That wasn't just money. That was a house for me and Leo. That was his entire college fund. That was the retirement I didn't have. That was the vacations I never took because I was saving. I wasn't saving. I was sponsoring. Greta! Her voice tinny and demanding, coming from the phone I still held in my blood-caked hand. Are you doing it? The clerk is losing patience. I looked at the nurse who had just walked in to check my vitals. She was a young woman with kind eyes. She looked at my bloodied hand holding the phone, then at my face. She didn't say anything, but her expression said everything. Why are you on the phone? I looked back at the screen. I was not a daughter in that moment. The daughter died when the truck hit my sedan. The daughter died when her mother asked for $4,000 before asking if she was alive. I was a risk manager, and I was looking at a liability that was bleeding the asset dry. I tapped the settings icon. My finger left a small smear of red on the glass. I scrolled down to linked accounts. I saw Darlene Cross, Platinum Visa. I tapped Manage. Greta, answer me! The voice from the speaker was shrill now. I didn't answer. I pressed Remove Authorized User. A warning popped up. Are you sure? This will decline all pending transactions and prevent future overdraft protection. I didn't hesitate. I didn't shake. The coldness that had started in my stomach had spread to my limbs, numbing the pain of the broken ribs. I pressed Yes. Loading. Success. I wasn't done. I went to the main menu. I selected Security. I toggled the switch for Lock All International Transactions. Then I set a spending limit on domestic transfers. $0 without two-factor authentication. I brought the phone back to my ear. Mom, I said. My voice sounded different to me. It wasn't the voice of Greta the child. It was the voice of Greta the mother, protecting her own young. Finally, did you send it? No. The silence on the other end was deafening. It was heavier than the silence of the grave I had almost just ended up in. What did you say? Her voice dropped an octave. It was the dangerous tone. The one that used to make me apologize for things I hadn't done. I said no. I removed you from the account. The card is not going to work. Not for the resort. Not for the flight. Not for the wine. Have you lost your mind? She screamed so loud the nurse flinched. "You are having a reaction to the medication. You are confused. Put me on with a doctor. I am your mother. You cannot cut me off in the middle of a trip. Do you know how humiliating this is?" I am lying on a stretcher. "Mom," I said, speaking slowly, enunciating every syllable. "My chest is crushed. I am bleeding, and you are worried about a hotel room." "I am worried about your mental state," she countered, gaslighting me with the ease of a professional. "You are clearly in shock. You are being irrational and spiteful. Fix it. Fix it right now, Greta, or I swear to God." I hung up. The silence that followed was instant and pure. I dropped the phone onto the sheets. My hand was trembling now, but not from fear. It was the adrenaline crash. The nurse moved closer, checking the IV bag. "Is everything okay, hun?" she asked softly. "No," I whispered. "But it will be." The phone lit up again. A text message. Then another. Then another. From Mom. "You ungrateful brat. Enable the card. Now." From Mom. "They are asking for another card. I don't have one with this limit. You are stranding me." From Mom. "Sloan is going to be furious. Fix this." From Mom. "Answer me." Not one text asked if I was in pain. Not one text asked if I needed surgery. Not one text asked if Leo knew. I watched the notifications stack up on the lock screen like evidence in a trial. I closed my eyes and let the darkness behind my eyelids settle. I pictured the bank account. I pictured the years of loans that were never repaid, the emergencies that were actually designer handbags, the medical bills that were actually spa retreats. I had been an ATM that breathed. I had been a wallet with a pulse. I took a breath. It hurt, a sharp stab in my left side, but I welcomed it. It was real. It was mine. $380,000, I murmured to the sterile room. The nurse paused. "What was that, sweetie?" I opened my eyes and looked at the ceiling. "Nothing," I said. "Just doing some accounting." I reached out and turned the phone completely off. The buzzing stopped. The demand stopped. The connection was severed. My ribs were broken. My car was destroyed. My body was a wreck. But for the first time in 8 years, my finances were safe. I stared at the blue thread on the curtain. I knew this wasn't over. Darlene Cross did not accept no as an answer. She accepted no as a challenge. She would be coming. She would bring Sloan. She would bring the guilt. She would bring the rage. Let them come. I lay back, feeling the hardness of the mattress against my spine. I was Greta Thomas. I was alive, and I was done paying for the privilege of being their daughter. From today, the cash flow changes direction. The morphine drip was doing its job, softening the edges of the broken ribs, but it could not silence the memories. In the quiet of that hospital room, with my phone finally dead and dark on the bedside table, my mind did not drift to the accident. It drifted back to the beginning. People think financial abuse starts with a stolen credit card or a forged signature. They think it is a sudden crime, like a mugging in an alleyway. It is not. It is a slow, methodical grooming process. It is a seed planted in the soil of your childhood, watered with guilt, and pruned with conditional love until you do not even realize you are a crop being harvested. I was 11 years old the first time I understood the currency of my mother's affection. It was a Tuesday evening in November. The kitchen smelled of pot roast and floor wax. I sat at the round oak table, my legs swinging nervously, a report card smoothing out under my sweating palms. I had 4 A grades and 1 B+. The B+ was in history. I had worked harder on that history grade than anything else, pulling it up from a C average. I felt a swell of pride so big it almost hurt. My mother walked in, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She looked at the paper. She did not smile. She did not frown. She simply stopped seeing me. It was a terrifying magic trick she could perform. One moment, I was her daughter, sitting in her kitchen. The next, I was a ghost. She walked past me to the stove. She served dinner to my stepfather. She asked him about his day at the dealership. She hummed a tune while she poured water, but she did not set a plate for me. I sat there, the report card burning a hole in the tablecloth. "Mom?" I whispered. She looked through me, her gaze fixing on the window behind my head. "I thought I had a daughter who excelled," she said to the air. "I thought I was raising a winner. I suppose I was mistaken." The silence that followed was heavier than any scream. I went to bed hungry that night, not because there was no food, but because I felt I hadn't earned the right to eat it. The next semester, I brought home straight A's. She hugged me so tight my ribs ached, bought me a new dress, and paraded me around the church picnic like a show pony. "Look at her," she told everyone. "She gets it all from me." That was the lesson, encoded into my 11-year-old brain. Love is a transaction. Performance equals existence. Failure equals erasure. By the time I was 16, the implicit rules became explicit doctrine. I was sitting on the edge of her bed, watching her apply makeup in the vanity mirror. She was beautiful, in a sharp, terrifying way. I was complaining about something trivial, probably chores or homework, the usual teenage grievances. She stopped applying her lipstick. She turned to me, her eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that froze the air in the room. "Greta," she said, her voice low and serious, "do you know what I went through to bring you into this world? 20 hours of labor. My body was never the same. My career was put on hold. My life, as I knew it, ended so yours could begin." She leaned forward. "I gave birth to you. You owe me your life, literally. There is nothing you can ever do, no amount of money you can ever make, that will square that ledger. You are in debt to me from your first breath to my last." It sounded almost biblical. It sounded like a holy covenant. I nodded, feeling a heavy mantle of obligations settle onto my shoulders. I didn't know then that parents are supposed to give without expecting a return on investment. I thought I was a walking deficit that needed to be repaid. At 19, the financial grooming moved from emotional to practical. I was working at a diner near the campus, smelling of old fryer grease and cheap coffee, pulling double shifts to pay for textbooks. I had my first debit card. It felt like freedom. It felt like adulthood. One afternoon, my mother called. She was at the grocery store. She had forgotten her wallet. Could she just borrow my card numbers to pay for the week's food? "It is just milk and eggs. Greta," she said. "Don't be stingy." I gave her the numbers. I felt important. I was helping. The charge that came through was not for milk and eggs. It was for $150. Steaks, wine, fancy cheeses. When I asked her about it, she laughed, a light, tinkling sound that made me feel small. "Oh, honey, I threw a little dinner party. You wouldn't want me to serve guests hot dogs, would you? I will pay you back next week." Next week never came. And then it happened again. A gas fill-up here, a necessary pair of shoes there because she had an interview and needed to look presentable. Whenever I hesitated, whenever I said I needed that money for rent or books, she would sigh. It was a tragic, disappointed sigh. "You have changed, Greta," she would say. "You used to be such a generous girl. Money is really making you ugly. Is this how you treat the woman who wiped your bottom?" The shame would wash over me. Hot and prickly, I would apologize. I would hand over the card. I would apologize for having boundaries. The trap snapped shut when I was 22. I had graduated and landed my first real corporate job. I felt steady. I felt capable. My mother took me to lunch to celebrate, then drove me to the bank. "We need to set up your accounts properly," she said, "now that you have real assets." We sat in the cubicle with a banker who smiled too much. My mother did all the talking. She spoke about safety. She spoke about emergency contingencies. "If Greta gets stranded somewhere," my mother told the banker, "or if her system goes down, I need to be able to help her instantly. We should link the accounts. For overdraft protection. It goes both ways. Of course, we protect each other. We are a team." It sounded sensible. It sounded like love. "We are a team," I signed the paper. I authorized the link. I didn't read the fine print that allowed funds to sweep automatically from my healthy account to cover deficits in her volatile one. I didn't see the wolf baring its teeth. I only saw my mother offering a safety net. I didn't know the safety net was actually a spider web. Then came the tragedy that cemented her control. My husband, Mark. We had been married 3 years. He was the first person who ever loved me without sending an invoice. He made me laugh. He told me I didn't owe anyone anything. When he died in a construction accident, my world shattered into a million jagged pieces. I was 26, a widow, and pregnant with Leo. I was vulnerable. I was raw. And my mother stepped into that void not as a healer, but as a conqueror. She didn't hold me while I cried. She organized the funeral, picking the most expensive casket, the most lavish flowers, all paid for from Mark's life insurance payout. When I tried to protest, to say Mark would have wanted something simple, she hushed me. People are watching, Greta, she hissed at the graveside. Do you want them to think you didn't love him? We have to show them. After the funeral, she sat me down. I am the only family you have left, she said. Mark is gone. It is just us now. Us and the baby. You need to lean on me. You are not thinking clearly. She was right. I wasn't thinking clearly. I was drowning in grief. So I let her take the reins. She helped me manage the insurance money. She advised me on where to live, which coincidentally was closer to her. As Leo grew, the grooming intensified. She used my son as the new lever. If I bought generic brand diapers to save money, she would sneer. Are you putting that sandpaper on my grandson? I bought him the premium ones. Just transfer me the money. Do not be a bad mother. Greta. If I wanted to stay home on a Friday night, she would call. Frantic. I am at dinner with the ladies from the club, and my card is acting up. Transfer $200. Now, do not embarrass me. Do you want people to think your mother is a pauper? How does that reflect on Leo? It is for the family image, she would say. It is for dignity. I started earning more money. I was good at my job. I was a risk analyst. I spent my days assessing threats for a billion-dollar company, spotting fraudulent patterns, identifying weaknesses in corporate structures. But when I came home, I couldn't see the fraud sitting at my own kitchen table. She criticized me for not enjoying life while she spent my money on spas and resorts. You are so uptight, Greta, she would say while booking a weekend getaway on my dime. You work too hard. You need to learn to flow, like me. I was wearing 5-year-old shoes so she could wear designer heels. I was driving a sedan with a rattling muffler so she could lease a luxury SUV to drive Leo around safely. I remember one specific afternoon last year. I was looking at my budget, trying to figure out how to afford a math tutor for Leo. I told her I was tight on cash. She looked at me, sipping a latte that I had paid for, and said, Maybe if you didn't hoard your money, the universe would bless you with more. You are blocking your own abundance with this scarcity mindset. Then she asked for $500 for a networking event to help her consulting business. I gave it to her. I gave it to her because the alternative was the cold shoulder. The alternative was the "you don't love me" speech. The alternative was the "after everything I sacrificed for you" lecture. But lying there in the hospital bed, staring at the sterile ceiling tiles, the pattern finally clicked. She didn't beat me. She didn't lock me in a closet. She didn't starve me. She did something much more sophisticated. She monetized my guilt. She turned her love into a subscription service. And she raised the premiums every time I got a raise. I wasn't stupid. I wasn't weak. I was programmed. I had been built, brick by brick. From the age of 11, to be a support system for a woman who refused to support herself, I was a colonized country, and she was the empire extracting resources. I gave birth to you. You owe me for life. The sentence echoed in my head. No, I closed my eyes, and for the first time, the guilt didn't come. Only a cold, hard clarity. I didn't owe her my life. She gave me life, yes, but she had been charging me rent on it for 30 years. The lease was up. I opened my eyes. The pain in my chest was still there. But the heaviness in my soul had shifted. I wasn't a victim of a car accident anymore. I was a risk manager who had finally identified the biggest threat to the enterprise, and I knew exactly how she would react when the money stopped. She wouldn't come here to check my pulse. She would come here to check her access. I waited for the sound of high heels in the hallway. I knew they were coming, and this time, I wouldn't be the daughter who paid the bill. I would be the stranger who closed the account. The silence in the room after I hung up on my mother was not peaceful. It was the heavy, pressurized silence of a submarine diving into deep water. I knew the physics of Darlene Cross. I knew her velocity and her trajectory. When an object in motion meets a sudden obstacle, like a declined credit card, it does not stop. It changes direction. She was not going to call back and beg. She was going to come here and conquer. I had 20 minutes, maybe 30. That was the time it would take for her to leave the check-in desk at the Sapphire Sands, scream at a valet, retrieve her car, and speed down the highway to the hospital. I needed an ally. I turned my head, the movement sending a fresh spike of fire through my clavicle. The nurse who had checked my vitals was standing by the computer terminal, typing. I squinted at her badge. Tessa. The name hit me like a warm memory in a cold room. 7 years ago, in a different wing of this same hospital, a nurse named Tessa had held my hand while I labored with Leo. She was the one who had kicked my mother out of the delivery room when Darlene had started complaining that my groans of pain were giving her a migraine. Tessa? I croaked. She turned, her eyes widening slightly. You remember me? You saved my sanity 7 years ago, I whispered. I need you to save my life now. She walked over to the bedside, her expression shifting from professional detachment to concern. Your vitals are stable, Greta, but your heart rate is climbing. You need to rest. I cannot rest, I said, gripping the bed sheet with my non-IV hand. My mother is coming. Darlene, do you remember her? Tessa's face hardened instantly. It was a micro-expression, a tightening of the jaw. But I saw it. You do not forget Darlene Cross. The woman with the oversized sunglasses who tried to order a latte from the phlebotomist? That is the one. Listen to me. Tessa. She is not coming to visit. She is coming to take control. I need you to do exactly what I say. I took a shallow breath. Put a note on my chart. Put it on the door. Write that the patient is extremely sensitive to stimuli and easily agitated by pain. Strict limitation on visitors. No one enters without prior medical clearance. I can ban her completely if you want, Tessa said, her hand hovering over the call button for security. We have protocols for toxic family members. No, I said. If you ban her, she will go to the administration. She will scream about rights. She will call the police and say I am being held against my will. She is a master of escalation. I need her to get in, but I need the environment to be hostile to her. I need her to break the rules. Tessa looked at me for a long moment, assessing my lucidity, then she nodded. I will mark the room as high stress/low stimulation. We will dim the lights. If she raises her voice 1 decibel, I will have security escort her out for endangering patient recovery. Thank you, I breathed, as Tessa moved to dim the overhead lights and adjust the blinds, leaving the room in a twilight gloom. I turned back to my phone. The battery was at 18%. It had to be enough. I ignored the stack of text messages that were still piling up. I opened my messaging app and found Mara Klein. Mara was a shark in a pencil skirt. We had gone to college together, and while I went into risk analysis, she went into family law. She had told me 5 years ago that my financial arrangement with my mother was a disaster waiting to happen. I hadn't listened then. I was listening now. I typed 1 sentence, my thumb trembling over the glass. If my mother shows up, treat it like there is someone currently trying to rob my life. I hit send. Then I added a second message. She is cut off. She is desperate. I am at Briar Glen ER. 3 dots appeared instantly. Then a reply. On my way. Do not sign anything. Do not even nod your head. Step 1 complete. Legal cavalry was inbound. Now for the fortress. I opened a private browsing tab. I didn't trust the apps anymore. If my mother had my old devices, she might have my cached passwords. I went to my primary email provider. I selected Reset Password. The prompt asked for a verification code sent to my recovery email. I froze. My recovery email was an old account I had set up in high school, an account my mother definitely had access to because she used to check it for college acceptance letters and never stopped. If I sent the code there, she would see it. She would know I was locking her out. She would reset it first. I chose Try Another Way. Answer security questions. Question 1. What is your mother's maiden name? Too easy. She would guess that I used it. Question 2. What was the name of your first pet? Barnaby, the golden retriever, but she knew that she had sold him when I was 12 because he shed too much on the carpet. Question 3. What is the name of your favorite teacher? I hesitated. I had always used Mr. Henderson. My mother knew that too. She knew everything. I realized then how deep the surveillance went. She hadn't just groomed my finances. She had groomed my security questions. She had ensured that the keys to my digital life were always shaped like her memories. I backed out. I called the customer service number for the email provider directly. It took 4 agonizing minutes of navigating a voice menu, listening to jazz music that sounded like a funeral dirge. Customer security. This is David, a voice finally answered. This is Greta Thomas, I said, my voice steel. I am currently in the hospital. I believe my account is compromised by a family member with access to my personal data. I need to trigger a force logout on all devices and switch the recovery method to phone number only, right now. Ma'am, I need to verify your identity. Can you tell me the last 3 transactions on the associated wallet? No, I said, because she is using it, but I can tell you the account creation date was August 14th, 2010. I can tell you the IP address usually logs in from Columbus, and I can tell you that if you do not lock this account, I will sue your company for facilitating identity theft. David paused. I am sending a one-time push notification to the device you are calling from. Please confirm. A banner flashed on my screen. I tapped yes. Okay. Ms. Thomas, I have purged all active sessions, including one on a... He tapped a key. An iPad in Sapphire Sands, Ohio. It was active 2 minutes ago. My stomach lurched. She was already in my email. She was probably looking for bank statements or transfer confirmations. Lock it, I said. Change the password to a temporary string and text it to me. Done. I hung up and immediately logged in with the new code. I changed the password to a random string of 20 characters involving symbols and numbers that had no connection to my birthday, my son, or my dead husband. Next, the bank. I didn't just freeze the card this time. I went into the profile section. I found the setting for large transaction verification. I toggled it to strict. Now, any transfer over $100 would require a biometric scan and a code from a separate authenticator app. I downloaded the authenticator app. I linked it. I watched the little blue circle spin. Locking the gate. I was sweating now. The pain in my chest was becoming a dull, rhythmic thudding that made it hard to focus. The nurse had given me something, likely a strong opioid, and I could feel the edges of my vision starting to blur. The white ceiling tiles were softening, blending together. I had one more call, the most important one. I dialed the internal hotline for Evercrest Risk and Compliance. It was a number I had memorized for work, usually to report phishing attempts or compliance breaches. Security Operations, a gruff voice answered. This is Greta Thomas, Senior Analyst, Employee ID 4492, I said. My tongue felt thick. The drugs were working fast. I am reporting a code gray on my own identity. Code gray? Are you under duress, Ms. Thomas? I am hospitalized. I have reason to believe a third party will attempt to impersonate me to access payroll, life insurance, or benefits. I am initiating a total freeze on my employee file. No changes to direct deposit, no beneficiary updates, no employment verification letters to be issued without a voice-confirmed passkey. Understood. What is the passkey? I thought for a second. Barnaby, I said. The dog she sold. Copy that. File is locked. Do you need law enforcement assistance? Not yet, I said. But keep the logs ready. I dropped the phone onto my chest. My arm felt like it weighed 50 pounds. The room was dim, the air conditioning humming a low, monotonous note. I had built the wall. I had dug the moat. Now I had to wait for the siege. I closed my eyes, letting the darkness take me. But not all the way. I kept a small part of my brain awake, a sentry pacing the perimeter of my consciousness. I knew what she would do next. She had tried the money, failed. She had tried the guilt, failed. She had tried the email, failed. There was only one card left in her deck, the trump card. If I was incapacitated, if I was mentally unfit or unconscious, the next of kin automatically gained certain decision-making powers unless a proxy was designated. She didn't just want the $3,000 for the hotel anymore. She wanted the power to liquidate everything for my care. She would try to declare me incompetent. She would try to get me to sign a power of attorney while I was high on morphine. Or better yet, she would try to sign it herself, claiming I had verbally authorized it before I passed out. Click, click, click. The sound was faint at first, then sharper. Hard soles on linoleum. Fast, rhythmically aggressive. It wasn't the squeak of nurse shoes. It wasn't the shuffle of patients. It was the staccato beat of expensive heels. I heard them turn the corner into the hallway. The cadence was unmistakable. It was the sound of a woman who believed the world owed her a path. I let my head loll to the side, facing the door but keeping my eyes slit open just a fraction, enough to see through the lashes, but not enough to look awake. I slowed my breathing. I relaxed my jaw. I had to look broken. I had to look defenseless. I had to look like the easy prey she had feasted on for 30 years. If I fought her at the door, she would put on a mask for the doctors. She would play the worried mother. She would charm them. But if she thought I was asleep, if she thought no one was watching, she would take the mask off, and I needed witnesses to see the face underneath. The footsteps stopped outside my door. I heard a hushed, angry whisper, then the rustle of a designer handbag. I felt the morphine pulling me down, a warm tide trying to drag me under. I dug my mental heels in. Not yet, I told myself. Stay with the pain. The pain keeps you sharp. The door handle turned. Come on, I thought, my heart hammering a slow, heavy beat against my bruised ribs. Come on in, Mom. The bank is closed, but the trap is open. The door swung open with a force that stirred the air in the room, carrying with it a scent I knew too well. Chanel No. 5 mixed with the metallic tang of anxiety sweat. Through my eyelashes, I saw them, the unholy trinity. Leading the charge was my mother, Darlene Cross. She was dressed for a crisis, which meant she looked immaculate in a cream-colored pantsuit that probably cost more than my first car. Her hair was perfectly coiffed, not a strand out of place, as if she had stopped for a blowout on her way to see her injured daughter. Behind her was Sloane, my half-sister. At 24, Sloane was a carbon copy of Darlene, just with tighter skin and less subtle manipulation tactics. She was wearing oversized sunglasses indoors and typing furiously on her phone. Bringing up the rear was a man I didn't recognize, but I recognized the type. He was wearing a suit that was slightly too shiny, carrying a leather briefcase that looked brand new. He had the hungry, restless eyes of a lawyer who chased ambulances or, in this case, wealthy relatives in comas. I kept my breathing shallow. I let my hand hang limp off the side of the bed. "Where is she?" Darlene demanded, not looking at me, but scanning the room as if assessing the amenities. "Why is it so dark in here? I can barely see my own hand." "The nurse said she is sensitive to light," Sloane muttered, not looking up from her screen. "Mom, the card just got declined for the Uber. The driver is texting me. This is humiliating." "Focus, Sloane," Darlene snapped. She marched to the side of my bed. I felt her presence loom over me, a cloud of expensive perfume and cold intent. She didn't touch my forehead. She didn't take my hand to comfort me. She leaned down, her face inches from mine, and I could hear her rapid breathing. "Greta?" she hissed. "Greta, wake up!" I didn't move. I didn't twitch. "She is out cold," Darlene said, straightening up. She turned to the man in the suit. "Mr. Vane, what are the parameters here? If she is unconscious, do I have automatic proxy?" Harrison Vane cleared his throat. His voice was oily, slick with false sympathy. "Technically, Mrs. Cross, unless there is a pre-existing medical directive, the next of kin has significant leeway in emergency decision-making. However, banks are tricky. They like signatures, or biometrics. If we can get the power of attorney executed now, citing lucid interval or emergency necessity, we can override the freezes she put in place." "She put a freeze on everything," Sloane complained. Finally pocketing her phone, she walked over to the other side of the bed and looked down at me with an expression of mild disgust, as if my broken ribs were an inconvenience to her schedule. "I cannot believe she did that. Who does that to their own family while bleeding out in an ambulance?" "Someone who is mentally unstable," Darlene declared. "That is the angle. Harrison, she was in shock. She was not thinking clearly. She locked us out in a moment of hysteria. We are here to fix it. We are here to take the burden off her." "Exactly," Vane said. I heard the click of his briefcase latches opening. "I have the document here. Durable power of attorney for financial and medical decisions. It grants immediate, unrestricted access to all accounts, assets, and real estate for the purpose of management during incapacity. It is standard. It was not standard. It was a blank check wrapped in legalese." "Does she need to sign?" Darlene asked. "A signature is best," Vane said, "but if she is too weak to hold a pen, a mark will do, witnessed by two people, or," he lowered his voice, "if we can access her device, we can execute the digital authorization through her banking portal. Most of these new systems allow for immediate unlocking if you have face verification." I felt Darlene's hand grab my wrist. Her grip was tight, her nails digging into my skin. There was no gentleness in it. She lifted my arm, testing its weight. "She is like a rag doll," Darlene said. "Greta? Greta, can you hear me?" She slapped my cheek, not hard enough to leave a mark, but hard enough to sting. It was a test. I forced myself to remain limp. I let my head roll slightly to the side, away from her. "She is out of it," Sloane said. "Just grab the phone. Mom, the one on the table." I heard the scrape of plastic on wood. My phone. The fortress I had spent the last hour building. "It is locked," Darlene muttered. "Of course it is locked. Harrison, bring the document. Sloane, get the pen. I am going to try the Face ID." This was it. The violation. I felt the mattress depress as Darlene sat on the edge of the bed, right next to my hip. She leaned over me, her body heat radiating through the thin hospital gown. I felt the cold glass of the phone screen press against my cheek, then pull back slightly. She was positioning it. "Come on," she whispered, her voice tight with greed. "Open up, you stupid thing." She grabbed my chin with her free hand, her fingers pinching my jaw to turn my face upward. She was physically manipulating my head like a mannequin. "Open your eyes, Greta," she commanded, her voice a low growl. "Just for a second. Look at Mommy." I kept them shut. My heart was pounding so hard, I was sure they could see it beating through the blanket. But they were too focused on the prize to notice the patient. "It is not working," Darlene said, frustrated. "Her eyes are closed. Does it work with eyes closed?" "Newer models require attention," Vane said, stepping closer. "She has to look at the screen. Maybe if you lift her eyelids?" I felt a chill of genuine horror. They were discussing prying my eyes open like I was a corpse on a slab. "That is gross, Mom," Sloane said, wrinkling her nose. "Just use her thumb. Does she have the fingerprint thing?" I don't know, Darlene snapped. She grabbed my right hand, the one with the dried blood. She jammed the phone against my thumb, pressing hard. Ouch, Sloane said. You are getting blood on the screen. I don't care about the blood. I care about the $3,000 I owe the hotel, Darlene yelled, her facade cracking. And the mortgage payment on the condo that is due on the 1st. If she doesn't unlock this, we are destitute. Sloane, do you understand? Destitute. Okay, Sloane said. Stepping closer, she leaned down, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Right into my ear. Mom, just hold the phone there. I will try to talk to her. Sometimes she hears me. Sloane smoothed my hair back. It felt like a snake coiling around a branch. Greta? Sloane whispered. Sissy, it is Sloane. Listen, you are hurt. You are confused. Mom is here to help. We just need you to open the phone, okay? Just unlock it and transfer the rights. Mom will handle the bills. Mom will handle the insurance. You just lie there and be quiet. We will take it all off your hands. You won't have to worry about a single penny ever again. And transfer the savings, Darlene added, her voice sharp. Tell her we need to move the savings to a secure account, my account, for safety. Right, Sloane said. For safety. Just give us the access. Greta, don't be selfish. Don't be difficult. I heard the scratch of a pen on paper. Vane was prepping the signature line. If she cannot sign, Vane murmured, I can guide her hand, as long as you two witness that she was nodding. It will hold up in court long enough to drain the accounts. Possession is 9/10 of the law. Mrs. Cross? Do it, Darlene said. Grab her hand, the right one. Put the pen in it. I felt Vane's clammy hand touch my fingers. He was trying to wedge a pen between my thumb and forefinger. Darlene was still holding my chin. Sloane was hovering over me, blocking the light. They were picking the carcass before the animal was even dead. I counted to 3 in my head. 1, 2, 3. I snapped my eyes open. Darlene shrieked and jumped back, dropping the phone onto my chest. Sloane gasped, stumbling into the bedside table. Harrison Vane froze, the pen still hovering in midair, looking like a child caught with his hand in the cookie jar. I didn't blink. I stared straight at the ceiling for a microsecond, then slowly, deliberately, turned my head to look at my mother. Get your hands off me. My voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was the low, vibrating growl of a predator that had just realized it was bigger than the things attacking it. Greta! Darlene clutched her pearls. Pearls I had bought her for Mother's Day 2 years ago. You gave me a heart attack. I thought you were in a coma. I know what you thought, I said, pushing myself up on my elbows. The pain in my ribs was blinding, white-hot jagged edges grinding together, but I used it. I let the pain fuel the rage. I heard every word. Lift her eyelids. Guide her hand. Drain the accounts. You are hallucinating, Darlene said quickly, her eyes darting to Vane. It is the medication, Harrison. She is delirious. She doesn't know what she is saying. I am not delirious. Darlene, I said, using her first name. It hit her like a slap. I never used her first name. I am the most lucid I have been in 30 years. I looked at Vane. Who are you? I am Harrison Vane, he stammered, taking a step back. Family attorney. Your mother retained me to ensure your interests were protected during this crisis. My interests? I let out a dry, hacking laugh that ended in a wince. You were about to forge a signature on a power of attorney document for a patient under narcotics. That is not legal representation. Mr. Vane, that is a felony. It is fraud. It is elder abuse. Except I am not elderly. I am just injured. Vane paled. He snapped his briefcase shut. I was under the impression you were non-responsive and required immediate assistance. I am responsive, I said, and I am assisting myself. I turned my gaze to Sloane. She was trying to blend into the wallpaper. looking anywhere but at me. "And you," I said. "Just lie there and be quiet. Is that what you told the doctors? Did you ask about my ribs? Did you ask about the internal bleeding? Or did you just ask where my wallet was?" "We were worried," Sloane whined, finding her voice. "You cut us off. Greta, Mom is stranded. We didn't know if you were dying or just being a bitch." "Sloane," Darlene admonished. But she didn't disagree. She turned back to me, her face shifting into the martyr mask. The eyes filled with instant, summoned tears. The lip trembled. "Greta, honey," she began, her voice trembling. "You have to understand. I was terrified. I called and you didn't answer. I thought I had lost my little girl. I just wanted to make sure everything was handled so you could rest. I didn't want you worrying about bills. So you tried to force my face into a phone?" "I was checking your messages," she lied, smooth as silk. "I wanted to see if Leo was okay." "Leo is fine," I said. "And you know that you didn't ask about him once. You asked about the hotel. You asked about the condo." I pointed a shaking finger at the paper Vane was holding. "Give me that." Vane hesitated. "Give it to her," Darlene snapped. "Let her see we were just trying to help." Vane handed me the clipboard. I looked at the document. It was exactly what I thought. General Durable Power of Attorney. It gave Darlene Cross the power to sell, lease, mortgage, and liquidate any and all assets. It gave her the power to change beneficiaries. It gave her the power to be me. "This isn't care," I said, looking up at her. "This is a robbery." "How dare you?" Darlene seethed, the mask slipping again. "After everything I have done for you? I raised you alone. I sacrificed my life for you. And this is how you repay me? By accusing me of theft in front of a stranger?" "You are not stealing from a stranger." "Mom," I said quietly, "you are stealing from your daughter, and you have been doing it for so long you don't even think it is stealing anymore. You think it is harvesting." "I am your mother," she screamed. The sound echoed off the tiled walls. "I have a right. You have plenty. You sit on that pile of money like a dragon while I scrape by. It is selfish. It is unnatural." "It is over," I said. "It is not over until I say it is over." She lunged forward, grabbing the bed rail. "You will sign that paper, Greta. You will sign it because you are weak, and you are hurt, and you cannot handle this alone. You need me. You have always needed me." She was right about one thing. I was weak. My body was failing. The adrenaline was fading, and the pain was returning with a vengeance. I felt dizzy. The room swayed. Darlene saw it. She saw my eyes lose focus. "See?" she said, triumph creeping back into her voice. "She is crashing. Harrison, get the pen ready. She is going to sign it now. Sloane, hold her hand." "No," I whispered. "Yes," Darlene hissed. "Do it." Sloane moved toward me. Vane uncapped the pen. Darlene reached for my face again. I looked at the door. "Tessa," I prayed. "Where are you?" "Get away from her." It wasn't Tessa. The voice that boomed from the doorway was deep, gravelly, and shook the floorboards. It was a voice I hadn't heard in 5 years. A voice from the past. A voice that sounded like Judgment Day. The three of them froze. Darlene spun around, her mouth dropping open. Sloane looked like she had seen a ghost. Harrison Vane looked like he wanted to dissolve into the floor. Standing in the doorway was a man leaning on a cane, but looking like he could beat the entire room to death with it. He was wearing a wool coat that smelled of pipe tobacco and winter air. He was 80 years old, but his eyes were sharp as flint. Flanking him were 2 hospital security guards and a woman in a gray suit who looked like the hospital administrator. My grandfather, Walter Hale. "Dad?" Darlene whispered, the color draining from her face so fast she looked like a corpse. Walter Hale didn't look at her. He didn't look at Sloane. He looked at Vane, then at the pen in Vane's hand, then at the document on my bed. He stepped into the room, the cane thudding against the linoleum with a sound like a gavel coming down. I suggest you step away from my granddaughter, Walter said, his voice low and dangerous. Before I have security throw you through that window. Dad, you don't understand, Darlene stammered, her hands fluttering. She is not well. We were helping. I heard you helping, Walter said. I have been standing in the hall for 2 minutes. I heard, force her hand. I heard, drain the accounts. He walked past Darlene as if she were a piece of furniture and came to my bedside. He looked down at me, his expression softening for a fraction of a second. Greta, he said. Grandpa, I whispered. Tears finally pricked my eyes. I hadn't called him in years. Darlene had told me he hated me. She had told me he blamed me for not visiting. She had built a wall between us. Rest now, he said. He turned back to the trio of vultures. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a thick manila envelope. He dropped it onto the table next to my shattered phone. It landed with a heavy, definitive thud. What is that? Sloane asked, her voice trembling. That, Walter said, placing his hand on the file, is the Hale Family Protective Trust, and I am the trustee. Darlene looked at the file, then at her father. What are you talking about? Greta's money is her money. She earned it. Greta's money, Walter said, smiling a smile that didn't reach his eyes, has been moved, as of 20 minutes ago, when I executed the emergency clause in her late father's will, a clause you conveniently forgot about. Darlene. You cannot do that, Darlene shrieked. I am her mother. I am next of kin. And I, Walter said, am the man who holds the keys. You wanted to rob the bank. Darlene? Too bad. The vault just changed owners. He looked at the security guards. Get them out, if they resist. Call the police. I have the fraud paperwork ready to file. The room went silent. The only sound was the beeping of my heart monitor, which had finally begun to slow down. The air in the hospital room underwent a sudden, chemical change. Moments ago, it had been thick with the frantic, predatory energy of my mother and sister, a chaotic storm of greed and desperation. But as Walter Hale stepped fully into the light, the chaos evaporated, replaced by a vacuum of absolute, terrifying authority. Walter Hale was 82 years old, but he moved with the hydraulic precision of heavy machinery. He did not look like a retiree coming to visit his sick granddaughter. He looked like a general arriving to court-martial a deserter. He wore a charcoal wool coat that hung squarely on his broad shoulders, and his silver hair was combed back with severe discipline. In his right hand, he gripped a cane made of dark, polished mahogany with a brass handle, but he didn't lean on it for support. He held it like a weapon he was choosing not to use. Yet, behind him stood the hospital administrator, a woman named Mrs. Higgins, who looked pale and apologetic, and 2 security guards who were wide-eyed, clearly having been briefed that the old man in the coat was the most important person in the building. My mother, Darlene, was the first to break the silence. Her face had gone through a rapid cycle of emotions, shock, fear, and now a desperate attempt at indignation. Dad, she said, her voice cracking. She tried to smooth the front of her blazer, a reflex of vanity even in the face of doom. You cannot just burst in here. We are handling a family crisis. Greta is incapacitated, and Mr. Vane here is helping us secure her assets. Walter did not look at her. He walked past her as if she were a smudge on a window pane. He came to the foot of my bed, his blue eyes locking onto mine. For a second, the iron mask slipped, and I saw a flash of profound, aching sadness. I am here, Greta, he said softly. I apologize for the delay. The traffic on the interstate was substantial. Grandpa, I whispered. My throat felt tight. I hadn't seen him in 3 years. Darlene had successfully engineered a cold war between us, feeding me lies that he was disappointed in my career. While feeding him lies that I was too busy to see him, I saw now, in the clarity of his gaze, that I had been a pawn in a game I didn't even know was being played. Walter turned slowly to face the trio by the window. He didn't shout. He didn't wave his arms. He simply reached into his coat and produced a thick, leather-bound folder. He placed it on the rolling table over my legs, right next to the pitiful power of attorney document Vane had been trying to force on me. The sound of the folder hitting the plastic table was heavy. It sounded like a judge's gavel. "Harrison Vane," Walter said, reading the name off the lawyer's badge without needing glasses. "I know your firm. You handle estate planning for the mid-level country club set. You are out of your depth, son." Vane bristled, trying to regain some professional stature. "Now see here, Mr. Hale, I am representing Mrs. Cross in her capacity as the primary caregiver. We are executing a standard emergency proxy. If you interfere, you could be liable for damages resulting from financial negligence." Walter smiled. It was a terrifying expression. It was the smile of a wolf looking at a rabbit that thought it could negotiate. "Open the folder," Walter said. Vane hesitated. "Open it," Walter commanded. The volume of his voice didn't rise, but the density of it increased. Vane reached out with a trembling hand and flipped the cover. Darlene and Sloane craned their necks to look. "Read the header," Walter said. Vane squinted. "The Hale Family Protective Trust. Established 2014. Keep reading. Who is the beneficiary?" "Greta Thomas," Vane read. "And the trustee?" Vane swallowed hard. His Adam's apple bobbed. "Walter Hale." "And the triggering clause for asset activation?" Vane scanned the legal text, his eyes widening as he parsed the dense paragraphs. He stopped. He looked up at Walter, then at Darlene, then back at the paper. The color drained from his face completely, leaving him a pasty, sweating mess. "Clause 7A, Vane whispered. "In the event of medical emergency, incapacity, or external duress, all personal assets of the beneficiary, including real estate, savings, and investment portfolios, automatically revert to the protective custody of the trust. The trustee assumes sole signatory power. All prior permissions, including power of attorney or authorized user status, are immediately null and void." The room went dead silent. I stared at the folder. 2014. That was the year my father died. My father, who had divorced Darlene when I was 5 because he couldn't afford her anymore. He had died with very little to his name, or so I thought. But he must have gone to Walter. He must have gone to his ex-wife's father and begged him to build a wall around me. "I don't understand," Darlene said, her voice shrill. "What does that mean? Greta's money is in the bank. I saw it. I have the statements." "You saw the shadow of the money, Darlene," Walter said, turning to her. "You saw the checking account. You saw the liquid cash she keeps for operations. But the ownership? The legal title to her life? That has never belonged to her alone. It belongs to the trust, and the trust belongs to me to protect." He took a step closer to her. "Her father knew what you were. He knew that if he died, you would descend on her like a locust. He came to me. We set this up 12 years ago. We structured it so that as long as Greta was safe and independent, the trust would remain dormant. But the exact moment, she became vulnerable. The trap would snap shut." Walter tapped the folder. "You just stepped in the trap, Darlene." "This is illegal!" Darlene shrieked. She grabbed the power of attorney form Vane had brought and shook it. "I have rights. I am her mother. This paper supersedes some old trust fund." "Mr. Vane," Walter said calmly, "explain to my daughter the difference between a power of attorney and an irrevocable trust." Vane looked like he wanted to vomit. He closed his briefcase. "Mrs. Cross, if the assets are titled to the trust, then Greta does not technically own them. She is just the beneficiary. You cannot get power of attorney over property she does not own. The document is useless. It is a key to a house that has been demolished." Darlene looked at Vane with pure betrayal. "You said we could get it. You said we just needed her signature." "I didn't know about the trust," Vane squeaked. "Nobody knew about the trust." "That was the point," Walter said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. It wasn't a smartphone. It was an old, rugged flip phone. He flipped it open and dialed a number from memory. He put it on speaker. Granite State Private Banking. Priority Desk. A crisp voice answered. "This is Walter Hale," he said. "Trustee ID 45892 Alpha Charlie Tango. Good morning, Mr. Hale. Voice print verified. How can we assist you?" "I am initiating a code red lockdown on the Greta Thomas subledger," Walter said, his eyes never leaving Darlene's face. "Reference number for the incident is today's date. I want to report an attempted unauthorized access via coercion." "Understood, sir. Lockdown initiating." "Furthermore," Walter continued, "I want to flag 2 individuals for the fraud database. Darlene Cross, Social Security ending in 4491, and Sloan Cross, Social ending in 2280. "Hey!" Sloan yelled, stepping forward. "You cannot do that. That is slander." "I am not finished," Walter said into the phone. "Block all linked cards. Revoke all supplementary access. And check the credit line for the condo at 12 Oak Street. If there is a lien on it backed by the trust assets. Call it in. Immediate repayment." "Processing," the voice said. "The call option on the condo lien has been executed. The full balance of $240,000 is now due. Notices will be sent to the resident." Darlene gasped. She staggered back as if she had been punched in the gut. She grabbed the bedside railing to steady herself. "You," she choked out, "you just foreclosed on me. That is my house. I live there." "You live in a house bought with money Greta's father left for her education," Walter said coldly. "You leveraged it against her future. The trust held the note. I let you stay there because Greta asked me to be kind. But kindness is over. You have 30 days to vacate." "Done," the voice on the phone said. "Anything else, Mr. Hale?" "That is all. Thank you." Walter snapped the phone shut. The silence that followed was total. It was the silence of an empire collapsing. Darlene stood there, her mouth opening and closing. No sound coming out. Sloan was scrolling frantically on her phone, likely checking her own accounts, only to find them red-flagged. "You cannot do this to family," Darlene whispered. "I am your daughter." "And she is my granddaughter," Walter said, pointing a gnarled finger at me. "You had a choice, Darlene. You could have been a mother. You chose to be a parasite. A mother does not stand over her child's hospital bed and try to pry her eyelids open to scan a face ID. I heard you. The security guards heard you. Mrs. Higgins heard you." He turned to the hospital administrator. "Mrs. Higgins, do you have enough for the report?" Mrs. Higgins stepped forward, her face stern. "Yes, Mr. Hale, we have witness testimony of attempted financial coercion and physical harassment of a patient. This is a violation of hospital policy and, frankly, grounds for criminal charges." She turned to the security guards. "Please escort Mrs. Cross, Ms. Cross, and Mr. Vane off the premises immediately. They are banned from Briar Glen Medical Center. If they return, arrest them for trespassing." "You are kicking us out?" Sloan screeched. "My sister is hurt. I have a right to be here." "You lost that right when you tried to steal her identity," I said. My voice was weak, but it cut through the room. Everyone turned to look at me. "Get out," I said. "Get out before I ask Grandpa to call the police for the assault with the phone." Darlene stared at me. Her eyes were wide, manic, filled with a mixture of terror and fury. She looked at the folder on the table. She looked at Walter, who stood like a stone sentinel. She looked at the security guards moving toward her. She realized, finally, that she had lost, not just the battle, but the war. The money was gone. The house was gone. The control was gone. "Don't touch me!" She snapped at the guard, who reached for her elbow. She straightened her jacket, trying to summon the shreds of her dignity. She turned to Walter. "You will rot in hell for this, old man." Walter didn't blink. "I will save you a seat, Darlene, but not in the VIP section." She spun around to face me, her face twisted into a mask of pure venom. It wasn't the face of a mother. It was the face of a creditor who had been defaulted on. "You think you have won?" she spat. "You think you can just cut me off? I made you. I molded you. You are nothing without me. You will come crawling back when you realize nobody else can love a broken thing like you." "That is enough," the guard barked, grabbing her arm firmly. "You will regret this," she screamed as they dragged her toward the door. "I will get what is mine. I will sue the trust. I will sue the hospital. You hear me? Greta, this isn't over. I will take everything." Sloane scurried after her, hiding her face from the people in the hallway, looking like a rat fleeing a sinking ship. Harrison Vane mumbled a hasty apology and practically ran out the door. Clutching his briefcase to his chest, the door swung shut. The silence returned, but this time, it was a clean silence. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 20 years. The tension left my body so fast I felt dizzy. Tears, hot and fast, spilled down my cheeks. Walter handed his cane to Mrs. Higgins and sat down in the chair Darlene had vacated. He didn't say anything at first. He just reached out and took my hand, the one Darlene had tried to force the phone into. He held it gently, his skin rough and warm. "I am sorry it took so long, honey," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I wanted to step in years ago. But your father, he made me promise. He said you had to see it for yourself. He said if I saved you too early, you would never really break free. You would always wonder if you were wrong about her." I squeezed his hand back. "I wasn't wrong." "No," Walter said. "You weren't, but you were conditioned. It takes a hell of a shock to break that kind of programming." He reached out and brushed a strand of hair off my forehead. "You did good. Greta, you fought her. You held the line until the cavalry arrived." "I thought I was alone," I whispered. "For so long. I thought it was just me against them." "You were never alone," Walter said. "We were just waiting in the tall grass. And now the field is clear." He patted the folder on the table. "Rest now. The trust has covered the medical bills. The security detail is outside. Nobody gets in unless you say the word. Not Darlene, not Sloane, not the Pope himself." I looked at him. This old man who had just dismantled my mother's entire life with a single phone call. I felt a sense of safety I hadn't felt since I was a child. Before the report cards, before the invoices. "Thank you, Grandpa," I said. He smiled, and this time, it reached his eyes. "Don't thank me yet. Wait until you see what we are going to do to get your money back. We are just getting started." I closed my eyes. The image of Darlene's terrified face burned into my mind. She had said she would come back. She had said she would take everything, but for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of her, because I knew something she didn't. She wasn't fighting a daughter anymore. She was fighting a dynasty. The morphine haze had fully lifted by the next morning, leaving behind a sharp, throbbing clarity in my ribs and a cold, calculating precision in my mind. I was no longer the frightened daughter praying for her mother's approval. I was a risk analyst looking at a compromised system, and I knew exactly how the breach would expand. My grandfather, Walter, sat in the corner armchair, reading the Wall Street Journal as if he were in his study and not a sterile recovery room. The peace was deceptive. I knew Darlene Cross. I knew that being thrown out of the hospital was not a defeat for her. It was merely a change of venue. She knew the economics of a car accident as well as any personal injury lawyer. A commercial truck running a red light meant a settlement. It meant pain and suffering damages. It meant lost wages reimbursement and short-term disability checks. To a normal mother, that money was for rehabilitation. To Darlene, it was a fresh vein of gold in a mine she thought had run dry. I was right. At 9 o'clock, my phone, which I had reactivated with strict biometric locks, buzzed. It was Mara Klein. "Greta," her voice was clipped, the tone she used when she was walking into a courtroom. "You need to see what just landed on my desk. Your mother did not go home to cry into her pillow. She went straight to the courthouse." "What did she file?" I asked, pushing myself up. The pain was manageable now, a dull roar rather than a scream. An emergency ex parte motion for temporary guardianship, Mara said. She is claiming you are suffering from post-traumatic psychosis and medication-induced instability. She has sworn in an affidavit that you were hallucinating at the hospital, that you didn't recognize her, and that you were being unduly influenced by an estranged relative to make reckless financial decisions. She is calling Grandpa an estranged relative? I almost laughed. He is the trustee of the fund she is trying to rob. She does not know the extent of the trust yet, Mara corrected. She thinks if she gets guardianship over you, she can override the trust's protective clauses or at least tie them up in litigation while she drains your personal liquid assets. She is asking for immediate control of your medical decisions and your checking accounts to pay for your urgent care. She is fast. Greta, I will give her that. Block it, I said. Already done. I filed a counter-motion attaching the police report from the accident, which states you were conscious and lucid. I also attached a statement from your attending physician confirming your mental capacity, but she is going to keep throwing paper at us. She is banking on you being too weak to fight back. I am not weak, I said. I am just getting started. Mara, I need a temporary restraining order, for me and for Leo, especially for Leo. Way ahead of you, Mara replied. I am drafting the petition for the TRO now. I am citing the hospital incident as financial abuse and harassment. But Greta, you need to know. Sloan tried to pick up Leo from school 40 minutes ago. The air left the room. My hand gripped the phone so hard I thought the screen might crack again. What? The principal just called me because I am listed as your emergency legal contact. Sloan showed up at the front office. She told the secretary that you were in a coma and that she was the designated guardian to take Leo to Grandma's house for the week. Did they let him go? My voice rose, panic flaring despite my resolve. No, Mara assured me instantly. You updated the pickup list last September, remember? After she forgot to pick him up for swim practice, you explicitly removed her and Darlene. The school checked the list, saw she was unauthorized, and asked for ID. When they told her she wasn't on the list, she made a scene, threatening to sue the district. Security escorted her off the property. I closed my eyes. They had gone after my son. They had tried to take him, not because they loved him, but because he was leverage. If they had Leo, they could force me to negotiate. Sign the papers. Greta, or you don't see him. Okay, I said, exhaling slowly. That is it. No more defense. We are going on offense. I hung up and looked at Walter. He had lowered the newspaper. He had heard everything. They tried to take the boy? He asked. His voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of a landslide. Yes, Sloan went to the school. Walter folded the paper meticulously. Then we stopped being polite with the paperwork. He pulled a laptop out of his bag. I have your consent to access your full financial history for the audit. You have access to everything. Grandpa, burn it down. For the next 3 hours, we turned the hospital room into a war room. Walter, despite his age, navigated spreadsheets with the speed of a forensic accountant. We built a timeline. We didn't just want to prove she was greedy. We needed to prove a pattern of systematic exploitation. We cataloged the text messages demanding money. We pulled the logs from the bank showing the transfers she initiated. We requested the security footage from the hospital hallway to prove she tried to force my Face ID. Nurse Tessa came in during her break and dictated a sworn statement about Darlene's behavior, specifically the phrase, "just get the signature," while I was medicated. But the real horror started when we looked at the mail. Greta, Walter said, frowning at a spreadsheet of recurring bills, why is your car insurance premium so high? And why are there late fees on your state tax filings from 2 years ago? I don't know, I said. I never got the notices. I thought I just missed a deadline. I paid the penalties and moved on. You didn't get the notices because they weren't sent to your apartment, Walter said. He turned the laptop screen toward me. Look at the address on file for your insurance carrier and the DMV. I squinted. P.O. Box, 404, Pack and Ship Station, Westbriar Mall. I don't have a P.O. Box, I said. No, Walter said grimly. But Darlene does. I had my investigator run a trace on her known addresses this morning. Box 404 is registered to Darlene Cross. I felt a cold shiver crawl up my spine. She changed my mailing address? She must have done it years ago. Probably forged a change of address form or did it online if she had your passwords. She has been intercepting your mail. That is how she hid the credit card offers she applied for in your name. That is how she hid the late notices. But why? I asked. Why go to that trouble? Because if you see the paper trail, you ask questions. Walter said, if the bills go to her, she can pay the minimums on the fraudulent accounts to keep them quiet. And you never know they exist until she misses a payment. Run a full credit report, I said. Experian, TransUnion, Equifax, all of them. Unfreeze everything for 1 hour and generate the report. We did it. The report loaded on the screen. A spinning wheel of doom. When the PDF finally popped up, I scrolled past the mortgage I knew about, the car loan I knew about, and the student loans I had almost paid off. And there it was. Lending Club Personal Loan. Opened. March 14th, 24. Original balance, $15,000. Current balance, $14,200. Status, current. $15,000, I whispered. I never took out a personal loan. I have an emergency fund. I don't borrow for consumption. Look at the purpose code, Walter pointed. Home improvement. I rent an apartment. Grandpa, I don't do home improvements. But Darlene does, Walter said. March of 24. Wasn't that when she remodeled her kitchen? The granite countertops she bragged about? She said she saved up for them. She hadn't saved a dime. She had renovated her kitchen using my credit score. How? I asked, feeling sick. How did she sign the promissory note? These online lenders require e-signatures, IP verification. Walter clicked on the loan details. The IP address traces back to a residential connection, but look at the device signature. iPhone 11, iOS 15.4. I stared at the screen. That was my old phone. I upgraded to the 13 2 years ago. I gave the 11 to Mom. I wiped it. At least, I thought I wiped it. You probably did a standard reset, Walter said. But if she knew your iCloud password, which we know she did, she could restore a backup. Or maybe you didn't wipe it. Maybe she told you she would handle it for you. Did she? The memory surfaced. I was busy, juggling work and Leo. I had handed her the phone. She had said, "Oh, don't worry about the trade-in. Honey, I will take it to the kiosk for you. I will make sure it is wiped clean." She had kept it. She had kept the physical device that was a trusted portal to my digital identity. She hadn't just used it to play Candy Crush. She had used it as a skeleton key. This is not just a toxic family dynamic anymore, I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of rage and realization. This isn't just a mother who is bad with money. No, Walter said, closing the laptop with a definitive snap. This is identity theft. This is wire fraud. This is mail fraud. And because she used the mail to facilitate the fraud, it is a federal offense. I looked at the white wall of the hospital room, but I saw the bars of a cell. She kept my old phone, I murmured. She changed my address. She tried to kidnap my son from school. She tried to force a signature while I was on narcotics. I turned to Walter. She is not going to stop, is she? Even with the trust blocking the big money, she is going to keep coming because she thinks she's entitled to it. She thinks I am her property. She thinks she can bully you, Walter said. She thinks you are still the little girl who wants her mommy to love her. She is banking on your sentimentality. I am all out of sentiment, I said. Grandpa, call Mara back. Tell her we are not just filing for a restraining order. What are we filing? Walter asked, though I saw the approval in his eyes. We are filing a police report for the personal loan, and we are notifying the postal inspector about the address change. I want a full criminal investigation. That is the nuclear option, Greta, Walter said softly. Once you ring that bell, you cannot unring it. She could go to prison. I thought about Darlene screaming about the hotel bill while I bled on a stretcher. I thought about Sloan trying to drag my terrified 7-year-old out of school. I thought about the $15,000 kitchen I was paying for. She built a prison for me my whole life, I said. A prison of guilt and debt. It is time she lived in a real one. Good, Walter said. He picked up his phone. I will get the team on it, but there is one more thing. The insurance adjuster is coming to see you this afternoon about the accident settlement. Darlene knows this. That is why she filed the motion this morning. She wants to intercept that check. She won't get near it. She might try a different route, Walter warned. If she cannot get the money, she will try to destroy the source. She will try to prove you are unfit to receive it, or unfit to keep it. Let her try, I said. I have the receipts now. I have the IP addresses. I have the device logs. She is playing checkers, and I have the entire board rigged. Walter stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the parking lot where the world was moving on, oblivious to the war in room 304. You know, he said, your father used to worry that you were too soft. He said you had a heart like a sponge, soaking up everyone else's pain. I did, I said, but sponges can be squeezed dry, and I am dry. Grandpa. No, Walter turned back, his silhouette framed by the light. You are not dry. You are hardened. Whatever happens next. Greta, do not look her in the eye when the handcuffs go on. It is not a sight a daughter should ever see. I won't have to, I said. I will be too busy counting the money she owes me. I lay back on the pillows. The pain was there, but it was distant. The real pain, the phantom limb of a mother who never existed, was finally starting to heal. I had the evidence. I had the lawyer. I had the grandfather who had waited in the shadows for a decade, and I had the truth. My mother wasn't a parent. She was a con artist who had been working the long con on her own flesh and blood, and the con was officially over. The hospital room had transformed from a recovery suite into a forensic accounting lab. My grandfather, Walter, had requested a portable printer and a high-speed secure hotspot. Papers covered the rolling table, the windowsill, and even the foot of my bed. To anyone else, it looked like a mess of spreadsheets and bank statements. To me, it was an autopsy. We were not cutting open a body. We were cutting open 8 years of lies. Walter sat with a highlighter in his hand, his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. Greta, he said, his voice devoid of emotion. Look at Category 4, the housing payments. I pulled the sheet toward me. For years, I had seen the line item on my account. Automatic transfer, Darlene Cross Rent Assist. It was $2,400 a month. I had always assumed she used it to pay her landlord directly. I see it, I said. Rent? I agreed to help her with it after Dad died. You didn't help her with it, Walter corrected. You paid it entirely, but look at the flow. The money leaves your account on the 1st of the month. It hits her checking account on the 2nd, and on the 3rd, a check is cut from her account to Briarwood Estates Leasing. So? She pays the rent? She pays it in her name, Walter said, tapping the paper. I pulled the lease agreement through my property data contacts. The lease is solely in the name of Darlene Cross. There is no guarantor listed, no cosigner. Do you know how she got approved for a luxury condo with no verifiable job and a credit score that should be radioactive? I shook my head. She used forged proof of income, Walter said. She submitted bank statements showing your transfers as salary from consulting retainer. She listed you, her own daughter, as her employer on the application. But she disguised your name as GT Holdings. She created a shell company narrative to justify the cash flow. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. She told the landlord I was her boss? She told the landlord she was a high-level consultant, Walter said. And you were just the client paying her fees. That way, she gets the credit history for the on-time payments. She builds a profile of financial stability using your money, while you remain completely invisible. You are not the safety net. Greta. You are the engine room, hidden below deck. shoveling coal so she can wave from the promenade. "Keep digging," I said. My voice was ice. "What else?" We moved to the medical expenses. Over 8 years, she had requested emergency medical aid 34 times. The total came to $42,000. "I remember this one," I said, pointing to a charge from 3 years ago. "She said she needed a root canal and a crown. $3,000. Walter cross-referenced the date with her credit card statement from the same week. "There is no payment to a dentist," he said, "but there is a charge for $2,800 to Forever Young Med Spa." "Botox?" I asked. "Fillers, laser resurfacing, and a premium skincare package." Walter read from the itemized receipt he had somehow obtained. "She didn't fix her tooth. Greta, she fixed her wrinkles. She walked around telling people she was aging gracefully while you paid for the needle." It went on and on. The car repairs were actually payments on a timeshare in Florida. The vet bills for a cat she didn't own were payments to a high-end dating service. The grocery money often coincided with withdrawals at a casino 40 miles away, but the numbers were only half the story. The real sickness lay in how she used the money to construct a persona. She is not just stealing for consumption, I realized, staring at a timeline Walter had drawn up. She is stealing for status. Look at this. I pulled up a cached version of her Facebook profile on Walter's laptop. Darlene Cross, the successful entrepreneur. There were photos of her at charity galas, tickets paid for by me, photos of her on business trips to Napa Valley, flights paid for by me. She has been playing the role of a wealthy, independent woman, I said. She borrows money from her friends, $50 here, $100 there, and pays them back promptly using my transfers. She does it to build trust. To look reliable, she uses my money to groom her reputation so she can borrow more social capital. It gets worse, Walter said. He hesitated, his hand hovering over a file labeled External Income. I wasn't sure if I should show you this until I verified it, but the investigator confirmed it this morning. "Show me." He slid a printout across the table. It was a screenshot of a website called the Resilience Circle. It looked like a legitimate support group for widows and single mothers. And there, right on the landing page, was a photo of me. It was a picture taken at Mark's funeral. I was wearing black, holding Leo, looking shattered. The caption read, "My daughter, the widow. When tragedy struck, I was the rock. I guided her through the legal battles, the emotional collapse, and the financial ruin. Learn my Phoenix method for rebuilding your family's life from the ashes." "She is selling a course?" I whispered. The air felt too thin to breathe. "She charges $99 a month for membership," Walter said. "She claims to be a crisis management coach. She tells these women, vulnerable, grieving women, that she single-handedly saved you, that she managed your settlement, that she raised Leo while you were incapacitated by grief." I felt physically ill. She hadn't just monetized my bank account, she had monetized my trauma. She had taken the worst moment of my life, packaged it, and sold it to strangers to feed her ego. "She calls it consulting income on her tax forms," Walter said, his voice trembling with suppressed rage. "But she doesn't declare the monthly stipend you send her. She lists that as nothing. It just appears—" "Wait," I said, my brain, trained to spot compliance risks, suddenly latched onto a detail. "Say that again. She doesn't declare the money I send her?" "No," Walter said. "I pulled her tax transcripts for the last 5 years. She files Schedule C for her consulting business, reporting a pittance, maybe $5,000 or $6,000 a year from this website scam. But the $48,000 a year you send her? Nowhere. It is not on the gift tax forms. It is not on the income line." "If it is a gift," I said, thinking aloud, "it is over the annual exclusion limit. She would have to file a form, even if she doesn't owe tax, but she didn't file." "Correct. And if it is income, payment for her services as a mother or property manager, then she is evading self-employment tax and income tax on nearly $50,000 a year." "Correct again," Walter said. She is walking a razor's edge. She thinks because it is family money, the IRS won't look. She thinks she is invisible. I leaned back against the pillows. The pain in my ribs was a distant hum compared to the sharp, crystallizing plan forming in my mind. She doesn't love money. Grandpa, I said. She loves the control that money buys. She loves the narrative. She loves being the hero of the story, even if she has to steal the script. So, what do we do? Walter asked. We have enough for a lawsuit. We have enough for an audit. I can turn this over to the IRS tomorrow, and she will be in prison by Christmas. No, I said. If we attack her now, she will play the victim. She will go to her resilience circle and cry about how her ungrateful daughter and evil father are bullying her. She will spin it. She will say the money was a loan, or a gift, or reimbursement. She will change the label to fit the defense. I looked at the stack of papers, the evidence of a life parasitic. We need her to define the money, I said. We need her to write down, in her own handwriting, exactly what that cash was, before she knows we have the evidence. A trap, Walter said, raising an eyebrow. A compliance trap, I corrected. In my world, when we suspect a vendor of fraud, we don't fire them immediately. We ask them to recertify their accounts. We ask them to sign an affidavit of compliance. I reached for a notepad and a pen. My hand was steady. We are going to offer her a settlement, I said. Mara will send a letter. We will say that I am tired of fighting, that I want to move on, that I am willing to resume the payments, if she signs a reconciliation agreement to clear the books for the trust. She will sign anything to get the tap turned back on, Walter said. Exactly. And in that agreement, we will give her two choices. Checkbox A. The money over the last 8 years was a series of personal loans. If she checks that, Walter said, she admits she owes the estate $380,000. We can garnish her wages, her Social Security, and put a permanent lien on everything she ever touches. And checkbox B, I continued. The money was compensation for caregiving services provided to Greta Thomas and Leo Thomas. Walter smiled. It was a vicious smile. If she checks that, she admits to tax fraud. She admits she earned unreported income for 8 years. We hand that document to the IRS, and she goes to jail for evasion. And the best part? I said. There is no box C for gift, because if she claims it was a gift, she admits she has no legal claim to future payments, and I can cut her off without her having any grounds to sue for support, but she won't pick gift. Her ego won't let her. She wants to believe she earned it, or she wants to believe she deserves to keep taking it. She will pick compensation, Walter predicted. She has spent years telling you that you owe her. She believes being a mother is a job she should be paid for. Then let her invoice us, I said, and let her sign her own indictment. I looked at the photo on her website. My grief, packaged for sale. Mara drafts the letter today, I said. We send it by courier. We tell her if she signs, we lift the freeze on the checking account for a good faith payment of $5,000. $5,000 is cheap for a confession, Walter said. It is not a payment. Grandpa, I said, closing the file. It is bait. I looked at the ceiling, imagining Darlene sitting in her condo, terrified of the eviction notice, desperate for a win. She would see the letter as a victory. She would think she had broken me again. She would think I was crawling back to the dynamic we always had. She wouldn't see the bars closing in until the ink was dry. Do it, I said. And make sure the paper is heavy stock. I want her to feel the weight of it when she signs away her freedom. The conference room in the hospital administration wing was neutral ground. It had beige walls, a long mahogany table that smelled of lemon polish, and a view of the parking lot where my mother's car was parked illegally in a handicap spot. We had set the stage perfectly. Mara Klein, my attorney, sat to my right, Walter sat to my left, silent and imposing as a stone gargoyle. I sat in the middle, dressed in fresh clothes Walter had brought. But I made sure to look tired. I kept my shoulders slumped. I kept my voice soft. I needed Darlene to believe that the fight had drained me. I needed her to believe that the Hale Family Protective Trust was a wall I was too weak to climb, and that I was desperate to find a back door for her. The bait had been simple. Mara had sent a courier to Darlene's condo, the one currently facing a foreclosure notice, with a single letter. Greta is exhausted. She wants to stop the bleeding. She is open to a reconciliation framework to lift the account freezes, provided we can categorize the past transactions for the trust's auditors. It was the kind of vague, corporate-speak capitulation that Darlene loved. To her, reconciliation meant surrender. She arrived 12 minutes late. She walked in not like a woman who had been dragged out by security 24 hours ago, but like a CEO arriving for a merger. She was wearing her power suit, a navy blazer with gold buttons, and she had Sloane in tow. Sloane looked less confident. She kept glancing at Walter, then at the door, like an animal sensing a trap but unsure where the spring was hidden. Notably absent was Harrison Vane. "Where is your counsel, Mrs. Cross?" Mara asked, her pen hovering over her legal pad. Darlene waved a hand dismissively, pulling out a chair at the opposite end of the table. "Mr. Vane is unavailable. He has a conflict of interest. Besides, I do not need a lawyer to talk to my own daughter. This is a family matter. Isn't that right, Greta?" She looked at me, her eyes searching for the weakness she had cultivated in me for 3 decades. She saw my slumped posture. She saw the dark circles under my eyes. She smiled, a tight, predatory curving of the lips. "I am glad you came to your senses," Darlene said, placing her handbag on the table. "This whole charade has been ridiculous. Do you know, I couldn't buy gas this morning? I had to use cash. Cash, Greta, like a drug dealer." "I am sorry, Mom," I said quietly. "The trust, Grandpa, the protocols are strict. I cannot just unlock the accounts. The system flags everything as suspicious activity." "Well, tell him to unflag it," Darlene snapped, shooting a glare at Walter. Walter didn't blink. He just stared at her, his face a mask of bored judgment. "We can unflag it," I said, sliding a document across the table. "But we need to clean up the ledger first. The auditors are asking questions about the last 8 years of transfers. They see $380,000 leaving my accounts and going to you. They are calling it misappropriation." Darlene bristled. "Misappropriation? That is my money. You gave it to me." "I know," I lied, "but the trust views it as a debt. Unless—" I paused, letting the silence hang. "Unless we can classify it properly, if we can define what that money was, we can close the audit, and I can request the freeze be lifted." Darlene reached for the document. It was titled, "Affidavit of Financial History and Classification of Funds." "What is this?" she asked, squinting at the text. "It is a multiple-choice form," Mara explained smoothly. "To satisfy the forensic accountants, we need you to declare the nature of the funds received from Greta Thomas between 2018 and 2026. There are 3 options. You pick one, you sign, and we can move forward with releasing your stipend." Darlene looked at the paper. She read the options out loud, her voice dripping with disdain. Option A. The funds were a series of personal loans to be repaid with interest. She laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "Loans? You think I borrowed that money? I am your mother, not your college roommate. I don't borrow." "I accept. So it is not a loan," I said, nodding. "That is good. If it were a loan, the trust would be legally required to sue you for the balance plus interest. We don't want that." Option B, Darlene read. The funds were unconditional gifts given with no expectation of service or return. She hesitated here. I watched her eyes flicker. This was the logical choice. If she checked gift, she was safe from the IRS. Gifts are not taxable income for the recipient. But if she checked gift, she was admitting that the money was charity. She was admitting that I was the benefactor and she was the beggar. More importantly, if it was a gift, she had no legal standing to demand it continue. You cannot sue someone for stopping a gift. It wasn't a gift, she muttered, her ego wrestling with her survival instinct. A gift implies you were doing me a favor. You weren't doing me a favor, Greta. You were doing your duty. She looked up at me, her eyes flashing with that familiar toxic entitlement. You owed me that money, after everything I did? The labor? The sacrifices? I gave up my career for you. I raised you alone. That money wasn't a present. It was restitution. Restitution, I repeated. So, you earned it? Damn right I earned it, she said. I worked harder raising you than any CEO works running a company. You were a difficult child. Greta. Needy. Expensive. That money was the least you could do to compensate me for the years I lost. Then you should look at option C, I said softly. Darlene looked down. Option C. The funds were compensation for services rendered, including but not limited to caregiving, life management, and consulting fees. Yes, Darlene said, tapping the paper with her manicured nail. This is what it was. Compensation. You were paying me for being your mother, for managing your life when you were too weak to do it yourself. Remember when Mark died? Who handled the funeral? Who handled the house? Me. That was work. Greta, expensive work. So you are saying, Mara interjected, her voice neutral, that the $380,000 was income? Payment for a job? Call it what you want, Darlene said, grabbing a pen from her purse. It was payment for services rendered. I earned every penny. Okay, I said. Then check box C and sign at the bottom. Sloane leaned forward. She touched Darlene's arm. Mom, she whispered. Wait, if it is income. Quiet. Sloane, Darlene snapped. I know what I'm doing. Greta is finally admitting she owes me. I am not going to let her wiggle out of it by calling it a gift like I am some charity case. She checked box C with a violent slash of the pen. I watched the ink settle into the paper. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but my face remained impassive. She had just walked into the kill zone. By selecting compensation, she had just legally declared that the money was taxable income. Income she had never reported to the IRS. Income she had never paid self-employment tax on. Income that, combined with her other scams, would put her in a tax bracket she couldn't afford, with penalties that would bury her. But I wasn't done. I needed it to be airtight. Mom, I said, just so there is no confusion later, could you add a note? Just to clarify that this was an ongoing arrangement? The auditors might think it was a one-time thing. Fine, Darlene said. She was empowered now. She felt the victory. She thought she was bullying me into a corner, forcing me to acknowledge her worth. She wrote in the margin. I read the words upside down as she formed them. You owe me. Monthly payment is correct. She signed her name, Darlene Cross. She underlined it twice. There, she said, shoving the paper across the mahogany table toward me. Satisfied? Now unlock the card. I have a hair appointment at 2. I reached out and took the document. I didn't look at it. I handed it directly to Mara. Mara took a red stamp from her briefcase, a notary stamp, and pressed it onto the page. Ka-thunk. The sound was final. She signed her name as the witness. Walter signed as the second witness. Is it done? Darlene asked, checking her watch. Can I go? You can go, I said. And the money? The money, I said, will be handled exactly as the law requires. Darlene stood up, smoothing her skirt. Good. I expect the transfer by 5 o'clock. Come on, Sloane. She turned and marched toward the door, her heels clicking on the parquet floor. She didn't look back. She thought she had won. She thought she had reestablished the hierarchy, but Sloane didn't move immediately. She stood up slowly, gathering her purse. She looked at Darlene's retreating back, then turned to look at me. Her eyes were wide, fearful. She had seen the notary stamp. She had seen the way Walter looked at the paper. Sloane was not smart, but she had the survival instinct of a cockroach. She knew the ship was taking on water. She leaned across the table, pretending to reach for a tissue. "Greta," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the air conditioner. "What is it, Sloane?" I asked, not looking up. She licked her lips. "If I stand with you, if I testify that she made me do the thing at the school, am I spared?" I looked at her then. My half-sister, the girl who had held my hand while our mother screamed at waiters, only to grow up and scream at them herself. "Spared from what?" I asked. "From whatever is about to happen to her," Sloane whispered. "I saw the way you looked at that paper. That wasn't a peace treaty. That was a warrant. I didn't smile. I didn't offer comfort. The truth is a good currency, Sloane," I said. "Start saving it up. You might need it to buy your way out of the indictment." Sloane paled. She nodded once, a jerky, terrified motion, and then scrambled after her mother. "Sloane, hurry up!" Darlene's voice drifted in from the hallway. "We need to stop at the wine shop." The door clicked shut. The room was quiet again. Walter reached out and picked up the document. He read Darlene's handwritten note. "You owe me. Monthly payment is correct." "She really wrote it," he said, shaking his head. "She confessed to 8 years of tax evasion because she couldn't bear the thought of calling it a gift. She defined the money as a wage," Mara said, placing the document into a plastic evidence bag, "which means she is guilty of failure to file, failure to pay, and filing false returns. With the interest and penalties, she will owe the IRS more than the condo is worth. And since she admitted it was for services, we can likely invalidate the service contract because it was formed under duress and coercion. Meaning I can sue for a refund of the wages paid to an unlicensed fiduciary. We get her coming and going," Walter said. "The IRS takes her freedom. We take the assets." He looked at me. "You didn't smile, Greta, even when she signed." I stood up, walking to the window. I watched Darlene down in the parking lot. She was yelling at Sloane, probably blaming her for the delay. She was unlocking her car, the car I paid for, with the gas I paid for, wearing the suit I paid for. She had no idea that the piece of paper she just signed was a demolition order for her entire life. "I didn't smile," I said, watching her drive away. "Because it isn't funny. Grandpa, it is tragic. She sold her own daughter for $3,000 a month, and now she just sold her freedom for a hair appointment." "Are you ready for the next step?" Mara asked. "I can upload this to the IRS whistleblower portal within the hour, and I can file the civil suit for restitution by end of day." "Do it," I said. "Upload it, file it, and Mara?" "Yes?" "Send a copy to Mr. Vane's office. I have a feeling he might want to start cutting a deal before the subpoena arrives." "Consider it done." I turned back to the table. The adrenaline was gone, replaced by a deep, hollow exhaustion. But it was a clean exhaustion. It was the feeling of finishing a marathon, not running from a predator. "Thank you, Mom," I whispered to the empty room. "That is enough. You finally gave me exactly what I needed." "What was that?" Walter asked. "Closure," I said, "and a tax-deductible loss. The fallout didn't happen all at once. It happened in a series of satisfying, rhythmic clicks, like a row of dominoes tipping over, one after another, gaining speed until the sound was a continuous roar. The first domino fell on a Tuesday morning, 48 hours after Darlene had signed the affidavit. I was sitting in my living room, finally discharged from the hospital, nursing a cup of tea and my healing ribs. The mail arrived. In the stack was a thick envelope from the fraud department of the bank that held the mysterious $15,000 personal loan. I opened it. The letter was polite, professional, and devastating. "Dear Ms. Thomas, following a forensic review of the disputed loan origination dated March 14, 2024, We have determined that the application was fraudulent. The digital fingerprint originates from a device previously associated with your profile, but flagged as inactive, an iPhone 11. Furthermore, the geolocation data places the applicant at the residence of Darlene Cross. We have closed the account and relieved you of the liability. Please be advised that due to the federal nature of wire fraud, this file has been forwarded to the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the local district attorney's office for prosecution. I put the letter down. Darlene hadn't just borrowed money in my name. She had left a digital footprint so deep she might as well have spray-painted her name on the bank vault. The second domino fell that afternoon. Mara Klein called me, her voice buzzing with the kind of professional excitement lawyers get when a plan works perfectly. "Greta," she said, "the state franchise tax board just woke up. Remember that affidavit Darlene signed? The one where she claimed the $380,000 was compensation for services?" "I remember," I said. "Well, we filed the 1099-MISC forms retrospectively yesterday, issuing her income statements for the last 8 years based on her sworn admission. The system immediately flagged a mismatch. She has reported zero income for those years. The automated letters just went out. She is looking at back taxes, penalties, and interest on nearly $500,000 of unreported earnings." "How much will she owe?" I asked. "With the fraud penalties? More than she has ever made in her life, and since she admitted it was wages, she cannot discharge the tax debt in bankruptcy. She is locked in. Greta, she built her own cage." I didn't have time to savor the victory because my phone rang. It was Darlene. I didn't answer. I let it go to voicemail. Then she called again, and again. Finally, a text came through. "You tricked me. Pick up the phone." I picked up, not because I was scared, but because I wanted to hear the sound of a bully realizing the playground was closed. "Hello, Mother," I said. Putting the phone on speaker, Walter was sitting across from me, sipping coffee. "You witch!" Darlene screamed. The sound was distorted, cracking with hysteria. "I just got a notification from my bank. My checking account is frozen. They say there is a tax levy, and the bank is calling me about a loan investigation. What did you do?" "I didn't do anything," I said calmly. "You did it. You signed the paper. Mom, you said the money was income. Income is taxable, and you used my identity to take out a loan. That is fraud. The systems are just doing what systems do." "I will ruin you," she shrieked. "I will call your boss at Evercrest. I will tell them you are a drug addict. I will tell them you are mentally unstable and stealing from the company. I will post it on every social media page in Ohio." I took a sip of tea. "Go ahead. I already briefed Evercrest Compliance last week. They know about the identity theft. They know about your threats. If you call them, you are just adding harassment to the list of charges. And honestly, they are a risk management firm. They hate fraudsters." There was a silence on the other end. A frantic, hyperventilating silence. She realized she couldn't threaten my job, so she pivoted to the only thing she had left. "You think you are so smart," she hissed, her voice dropping to a low, venomous register. "But you forgot one thing. You are a single mother with a brain injury. You are on narcotics. You are unfit. If you don't unlock my accounts by 5 o'clock, I am filing for emergency custody of Leo. I will tell the court you are neglecting him. I will take him, Greta, and you will never see him again." She hung up. My hand shook slightly as I put the phone down. "She wouldn't," I whispered. "She doesn't even like kids. She only likes Leo when he is a prop for her photos." "She doesn't want the boy," Walter said, his face darkening. "She wants the leverage. But she just made a fatal error." "What error?" "She brought the fight to family court," Walter said. "And in family court, character is everything." The third domino fell the next morning. Darlene made good on her threat. She filed an emergency motion claiming I was psychologically compromised due to the accident and that my vindictive financial abuse of her proved I was manic. She demanded temporary custody of Leo for his own safety. It was a bold lie, It was also a stupid one, because when the social worker arrived at my apartment an hour later to investigate, Walter was ready. He didn't just have tea and cookies. He had the hospital security footage. We sat the social worker, a weary woman named Ms. Alvarez, down in front of the TV. We played the clip. It showed me, unconscious in the hospital bed. It showed Darlene and Sloan entering. It showed Darlene grabbing my face, pinching my jaw, and trying to force my eyes open to scan the phone. It showed her screaming about the hotel bill while I lay there with broken ribs. Ms. Alvarez watched it in silence. Then she watched it again. She is physically manipulating an injured patient, Ms. Alvarez asked, pointing at the screen. To steal money, Walter clarified. And now she wants custody of a 7-year-old child, if she does that to her own daughter in critical care. Imagine what she would do to a grandson who refused to pose for a picture. Then Walter produced the affidavit from Nurse Tessa. The grandmother showed no concern for the patient's pain, only for the credit limit. She attempted to coerce a signature while the patient was sedated. Ms. Alvarez closed her notebook. Her face was grim. Ms. Thomas, she said to me, this claim of neglect is unfounded. In fact, based on this footage, I am opening a protective file against the grandmother. This is predatory behavior. By noon, the judge had not only tossed Darlene's custody petition, but had issued a temporary emergency protective order. Darlene was legally barred from coming within 500 feet of Leo, his school, or my home. She had tried to take my son. Instead, she lost the right to even say his name. The fourth domino was the loudest one yet. It was Sloan. Sloan was not a mastermind. She was a follower who had realized the leader was walking off a cliff. 2 days after the restraining order, I got a DM from a burner account. Meet me at the Starbucks on 3rd. Alone. I have something you want. I went. I didn't go alone. Walter waited in the car outside with the security detail, but I sat at the table alone. Sloan walked in wearing sunglasses and a hoodie, looking like a celebrity trying to avoid paparazzi, or a criminal trying to avoid the police. She looked tired. Her makeup was smudged, and her nails, usually perfect, were chipped. She sat down and slid her phone across the table. I am not going to jail. Greta, she whispered. I am 24. I cannot go to prison for tax fraud. Mom said she would fix it, but she is spiraling. She is drinking a bottle of wine a night and screaming at the TV. What is this? I asked, looking at the phone. Screenshots, Sloan said. From the family group chat, the one you are not in. Team Cross. I scrolled. My stomach turned. Mom, March 12th, 2024. Greta left her old phone. I guessed the passcode. It was your birthday. LOL. I am going to try to apply for that loan today. Sloan. Good luck. Get the kitchen done so we can host the brunch. Mom, January 29th, 2026. She is in the hospital. This is our chance. If she is out of it, we can get power of attorney. We need to move fast before she wakes up. Sloan. What if she says no? Mom. She won't say no. We will make her sign, or we will just use her face while she is sleeping. It was all there. Conspiracy, premeditation, lack of remorse. It wasn't just a bad family dynamic. It was a criminal enterprise discussing their heist. Why are you giving me this? I asked, looking up at her. Because the FBI called Mom yesterday, Sloan said, her voice trembling. They asked about the IP address. Mom hung up on them. I don't want to be an accessory. Greta, if I give you this, will you tell them I helped? I will tell them you cooperated, I said. I cannot promise immunity, but this helps. She is crazy, Greta, Sloan whispered, leaning in. She is losing it. She went to work yesterday and tried to pay for a customer's return using a card she stole from another employee's purse because her own cards were declined. What? She got fired, Sloan said. From the cosmetic counter. Security caught her on camera swapping the cards. They marched her out in front of everyone. She lost the job, the discount, everything. Where is she now? At the condo, Sloane said, "but the power got cut off this morning. She is sitting in the dark, telling everyone who will listen that you are the devil." I took the phone. "Thank you. Sloane, go home. Pack your things. Get away from her." Sloane nodded, tears streaming down her face, and ran out of the coffee shop. I walked out to the car and handed the phone to Walter. "We have the smoking gun," I said. "Conspiracy to commit fraud, written in black and white." The final dominoes fell fast and hard. Darlene's firing from the department store made the local gossip pages. Local socialite escorted out in credit card scandal. The Resilient Circle website she ran was flooded with comments from members who realized her success story was a lie. They demanded refunds. The payment processor froze her merchant account. Then came the eviction. The lien on the condo, triggered by the trust, meant the lease was voided. The landlord, realizing he had been duped by a fake employment letter, filed for immediate eviction. Darlene had 3 days to vacate. Her Mercedes was repossessed in the driveway. A neighbor filmed it and posted it online. I watched the video. Darlene was screaming at the tow truck driver, swinging her handbag, yelling, "Do you know who I am? My daughter will sue you. She is a risk manager." It was pathetic. It was tragic. And it was over, or so I thought. On Friday afternoon, 1 week after the hospital showdown, I received a notification from the court. Darlene had not fled. She had not surrendered. She had done something so brazen, so delusional, that even Walter was surprised. She had filed a motion for a public competency hearing. She wasn't fighting the fraud charges, not yet. She was fighting the trust. She had found a loophole, or she thought she had. She was claiming that the trust was invalid because I was coerced into it by Walter, and that she, as my mother, was the only one sane enough to manage my estate. She wanted a hearing, in open court. She wanted to put me on the stand and prove to a judge that I was mentally incompetent, ungrateful, and brainwashed. "She wants a show," Walter said, reading the summons. "She thinks she can charm a judge. She thinks if she cries on the stand and talks about how much she sacrificed, the law will bend for her. She thinks she is the victim," I said. "She truly believes it. In her mind, I am the villain who stole her lifestyle." "Do we settle?" Mara asked. "We can offer her a plea deal to avoid the circus." I looked at the summons. I looked at the evidence file, the bank fraud, the tax evasion, the text messages, the hospital video. Darlene wanted a stage. She wanted an audience. She wanted one last chance to spin the narrative. "No," I said. "No settlement. No plea deal." I stood up, feeling the strength in my legs returning. The pain in my ribs was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. "She wants a day in court," I said. "Let's give it to her. But she is forgetting one thing." "What is that?" Walter asked. "She is not the main character anymore," I said. "She is the defendant." I picked up the file containing Sloane's text messages. "She wants to tell her story? Fine. But I am going to finish it." The stage was set for the final showdown. Darlene Cross against the truth, and this time, she wouldn't be able to interrupt the verdict with a credit card request. The courtroom in the county probate division was smaller than I expected, but the tension inside was enough to crack the plaster on the walls. My mother, Darlene Cross, sat at the plaintiff's table. She had traded her power suit for a modest pastel cardigan and a skirt that looked slightly too big, clearly chosen to make her look frail and sympathetic. She was dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue, playing the role of the grieving, concerned mother to perfection. Her argument was simple and insidious. She claimed that the car accident had left me with cognitive deficits. She claimed that my grandfather, Walter Hale, had swooped in while I was vulnerable, brainwashed me against her, and forced me to sign over my assets to a trust that didn't serve my best interests. She was asking the court to void the trust's authority and appoint her as my permanent conservator. She wanted control, not just of the money, but of me, Judge Harrison, a woman with sharp spectacles and even sharper eyes, looked over the rim of her glasses at Darlene's new lawyer, a court-appointed litigator named Mr. Sterling. "So, let me understand this," Judge Harrison said, her voice dry. "You are asserting that Ms. Thomas was mentally incompetent when she executed the trust protocols, yet she is currently employed as a senior risk analyst for a major corporation?" "She is on medical leave, Your Honor," Sterling argued. "Her judgment is compromised. She cut off her own mother, her primary caregiver, without warning. That is indicative of paranoia and emotional instability, likely induced by the head trauma and the undue influence of Mr. Hale, who has been estranged from the family for years." Darlene nodded vigorously, sniffing loudly for effect. "I just want to protect her, Your Honor," she wailed softly. "She is not herself. She is being manipulated." I sat next to Mara Klein, my hands folded on the table. I didn't shake. I didn't cry. I waited. "Ms. Thomas," the judge said, turning to me, "would you like to address these claims?" I stood up. I smoothed the lapels of my blazer. I looked Darlene dead in the eye, then turned to the judge. "I would, Your Honor," I said. "I am not going to offer emotional testimony. I am going to offer a timeline." I picked up a remote clicker and pointed it at the screen Mara had set up. "Exhibit A," I said. "January 29th, 2026, 4:15 in the morning. I am in the emergency room with 3 broken ribs and a concussion. My mother calls. She does not ask about my injuries. She asks for $3,950 for a hotel room." Darlene gasped. "That is a lie." I was in shock. "Order," the judge snapped. "Exhibit B," I continued, clicking the remote. A text message log from the same morning, sent from Darlene Cross to Sloane Cross. Timestamp, 4:30 a.m. I read the text aloud, my voice steady. "She is out of it. If we can get her phone, we can approve the transfer. Just grab her hand." A ripple of murmurs went through the gallery. Darlene's face went pale. "Exhibit C," I said. "An affidavit signed by Darlene Cross just last week. In this document, notarized by my attorney, she swears under penalty of perjury that the $380,000 she received from me over the last 8 years was not a gift, but compensation for services rendered. She claimed she was my employee." I looked at the judge. "Your Honor, a woman who claims she was my employee cannot now claim she needs to be my guardian because I fired her. This isn't a competency hearing. This is a wrongful termination dispute disguised as family concern." Sterling looked at Darlene, confused. "You signed an affidavit?" Darlene looked trapped. I had to. They tricked me." "I call my first witness," Mara said, standing up. "Nurse Tessa Reynolds." Tessa walked to the stand, wearing her scrubs. She looked professional and unimpeachable. She swore the oath and sat down. "Ms. Reynolds," Mara asked, "you were the attending nurse on the night in question. Can you describe Mrs. Cross's behavior?" "It was predatory," Tessa said bluntly. "In my 20 years of nursing, I have never seen a family member act that way. She didn't ask the doctors a single medical question. She only asked about the patient's capacity to sign documents. When I told her the patient was on high-dose morphine, she asked if the patient could still hold a pen. Did she seem concerned for her daughter's life?" "No," Tessa said. "She seemed concerned for her daughter's credit limit. I had to threaten to call security to get her to stop trying to force the patient's eyelids open for a Face ID scan." The judge's eyebrows shot up. "She tried to force the eyelids open?" "Yes, Your Honor," Tessa said. "It was physically invasive and medically dangerous." "Thank you," Mara said. "No further questions." Darlene was shaking her head, mouthing liar at Tessa. But the damage was done. The image of a mother prying open her unconscious daughter's eyes was not something a judge forgets. "Next witness," Mara announced. "Sloane Cross?" Darlene froze. She turned to look at Sloane, who was sitting in the back row. Sloane stood up. She wasn't wearing sunglasses today. She looked terrified, but she walked to the stand. "Sloan," Darlene hissed. "What are you doing?" "Ms. Cross," the judge warned. "One more outburst and you will be held in contempt." Sloan took the stand. She refused to look at her mother. "Ms. Cross," Mara asked, "you were present at the hospital. You were also present in the family group chat. Can you tell the court what the plan was regarding Greta Thomas?" Sloan took a shaky breath. "The plan was to get the power of attorney signed before Greta woke up fully. Mom said if Greta got lucid, she would cut us off. She said we had to secure the assets while she was vulnerable." "Did your mother believe Greta was incompetent?" Mara asked. "No," Sloan whispered. "She knew Greta was smart. That is why we had to hurry. She said Greta was stingy and needed to be managed. She told me to go to the school and get Leo so we could use him as leverage." "Leverage?" the judge repeated, her voice turning icy. "Yes, Your Honor," Sloan said, finally looking at Darlene. "She said if we had the kid, Greta would sign anything to get him back." Darlene slammed her hand on the table. "You traitor! I gave you life. How dare you lie like this?" "Bailiff," the judge said calmly, "remove Mrs. Cross from the courtroom if she speaks again." Darlene slumped back in her chair, seething, her eyes burning holes into Sloan. "Thank you, Sloan," Mara said. "You may step down." Sloan practically ran off the stand, avoiding her mother's gaze, and sat behind Walter. "Your Honor," Mara said, "we have established that the petitioner, Darlene Cross, attempted to defraud, coerce, and manipulate the respondent, but we have one final piece of evidence regarding the trust she is trying to dissolve." Walter stood up. He walked to the front of the courtroom, leaning on his cane, looking every inch the patriarch Darlene had tried to erase. "Mr. Hale," Mara said, "as the trustee, can you explain the clawback provision in the Hale Family Protective Trust?" "Certainly," Walter said, his voice deep and gravelly. Clause 9, Section C, states that if any beneficiary or third party engages in financial exploitation, fraud, or coercion against the trust's assets, the trustee is mandated to seek immediate restitution. Furthermore, any funds previously distributed to said party under false pretenses are subject to immediate recall. He turned to look at Darlene. Based on Mrs. Cross's signed admission that the $380,000 she received was compensation for services, and based on the testimony today proving those services were actually a scheme of exploitation and abuse, I have, as of this morning, filed a civil suit to reclaim the full amount. Darlene's lawyer, Sterling, looked at the papers Walter placed on the bench. He turned to Darlene. "You admitted it was compensation? In writing?" I thought it would help," Darlene stammered. "I thought if I said I earned it, they couldn't call it a gift." "By admitting it was a wage for a service you performed fraudulently," Sterling whispered harshly. "You just gave them the legal right to sue you for breach of contract and malpractice. I cannot defend this." The judge read the documents. She took a long time. The silence stretched until it felt like a physical weight. Finally, she looked up. "Petitioner's motion for guardianship is denied with prejudice," Judge Harrison ruled. "There is zero evidence of Ms. Thomas's incompetency. There is, however, overwhelming evidence of Mrs. Cross's predatory intent." She turned to Darlene. "Mrs. Cross, not only am I dismissing your claim, but I am also granting Ms. Thomas's request for a permanent restraining order. You are to have no contact with Greta Thomas or Leo Thomas for a period of 10 years. You will not come within 500 yards of their home, school, or place of employment." 10 years? Darlene gasped. "But she is my daughter." "You should have thought of that before you tried to rob her on a hospital bed," the judge said. "Furthermore, regarding the admission of tax fraud and the identity theft revealed in these proceedings, I am referring this entire transcript to the District Attorney's Office for Criminal Investigation. We are done here." The gavel banged, It was the sound of a heavy door slamming shut on Darlene's life. I stood up. I felt light. The weight that had been on my shoulders since I was 11 years old. The weight of owing her, of needing to please her, of fearing her, was gone. Darlene sat frozen at her table. Sterling was already packing his briefcase, shaking his head. He walked away without shaking her hand. Walter put his hand on my shoulder. "It is over, Greta." We walked out of the courtroom, in the hallway. The fluorescent lights hummed. Darlene emerged a moment later. She looked smaller. The pastel cardigan didn't look soft anymore. It looked cheap. She saw me standing by the elevator with Walter and Mara. She marched up to us, her eyes wild. She opened her mouth to scream, to curse, to launch one final guilt trip, but then she stopped. She looked at the two bailiffs standing behind us. She looked at Walter's stony face. She realized she had no cards left to play. She turned away, trembling with rage, and walked toward the coffee kiosk in the lobby. She needed a moment. She needed a prop. I watched her order a latte. She reached into her purse and pulled out a credit card. A new one she must have opened recently, or maybe a prepaid one. She swiped it. The barista waited. The machine beeped a harsh, dissonant tone. "I am sorry, ma'am," the barista said, loud enough for the quiet lobby to hear. "It says, declined, issuer confiscation." Darlene froze. "Try it again. It is a mistake." "I cannot," the barista said. "The screen says, fraud alert. Do not honor. I have to keep the card." Darlene stared at the machine. Then she looked around. She saw the people in the lobby watching. She saw the security guards. And she saw me. Our eyes met for the last time. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just looked at her with the polite detachment of a stranger witnessing a minor public embarrassment. She snatched her purse, turned on her heel, and ran toward the exit doors. The automatic doors slid open, and she stepped out into the gray rain. Alone, with no umbrella, no car, and no daughter to call for a ride. 2 weeks later, the moving boxes were gone. The new house was quiet. It wasn't a condo or a penthouse. It was a sturdy brick house with a big backyard and a tire swing. Walter sat on the porch, watching Leo play in the leaves. The civil suit had been settled quickly. Darlene had no assets to fight it, so the court had garnished her future Social Security and liquidated what little she had left to pay back a fraction of what she stole. The rest was a write-off, a price I was happy to pay for my freedom. I stood in the kitchen, looking at the deed to the house. Owner: Greta Thomas. No cosigners, no hidden liens, no strings attached. I picked up my phone. It was quiet. No frantic texts, no demands for money. Just a message from Mara confirming the finalization of the restraining order and a picture from Sloane, who had moved to a different state to start over as a waitress, showing me her first honest paycheck. I walked out to the porch and sat next to my grandfather. "You okay?" Walter asked, watching Leo laugh as he spun on the swing. "I am," I said. "I used to think that if I cut her off, I would lose my family. I thought I would be an orphan." Walter put his arm around me. "You are not an orphan, Greta. You are the matriarch now. You get to decide what family means." I leaned my head on his shoulder. The air smelled of autumn leaves and wood smoke. It smelled like peace. "I didn't lose a family," I said, watching my son play. "I just stopped paying a salary to people pretending to be family." Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please drop a comment below and share your thoughts on my mother's downfall. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the Jane Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach even more people.